All right, time to jump into this deep dive. You're here because you want to learn about Identical Brains, Studios Limited, and their
Yeah.
upcoming IPO, and we've got their draft red herring prospectus right here. It's like having a backstage pass to their whole operation.
It's pretty fascinating stuff, and it really gives you a feel for their business, their financials, how they fit into this whole visual effects world. It's a booming industry.
Identical Brains is right in the thick of it. They're an Indian VFX studio founded back in 2019.
Yeah, pretty new to the scene.
But they've already made quite a splash. They worked on some big Bollywood films,
Oh yeah, you've got Kuch Express,
like Fillion Returns,
Phone Boot.
Satyamev Jayati 2, and they've even snagged awards for their work on shows like Scam 1992 and Rocket Boys.
Not bad for a company that's only been around for a few years.
So what's the secret? What makes them stand out?
Well, a couple of things. First off, they've figured out how to deliver really high-quality work at a competitive price. That's a winning combination in any industry, but especially in the global VFX market. Then you've got the fact that they're a TPN-audited studio.
Okay, hold up. For those of us who don't speak fluent VFX, what exactly does TPN audited mean?
It's kind of a big deal. It means they've met these really strict security standards set by the Trusted Partner Network. These big studios and streaming platforms, they need to know that their content is protected, and Identical Brains has proven they can handle that.
So they're not just talented artists, they're also
Yes.
playing by the rules in a high-stakes game.
Mm,
And that builds trust, which is huge when you're dealing with these multi-million-dollar productions.
absolutely.
Speaking of the industry, let's zoom out for a second and look at the bigger picture. The world of VFX seems to be exploding right now.
It really is. It's like everything's aligning to create this perfect storm of growth.
Like what?
Well, you've got these streaming giants like Netflix and Disney Plus. They're constantly pushing the boundaries of what's possible visually, and that's driving demand for more and more sophisticated VFX. Then on the tech side, you have all these advancements in CGI and VFX tools. It's like the impossible is becoming possible. And finally, there's this rise of virtual production techniques.
Yeah, that virtual production thing sounds cool, but also kind of confusing. What is it exactly?
Imagine instead of filming actors in front of a green screen and adding in the background later, they're acting inside this real-time generated environment. It's almost like they're in a video game world. That's virtual production.
Wow, that's a game changer. No wonder the industry's booming.
Mhm.
So where does India fit into all of this?
India is becoming a major player in the global VFX scene. Indian studios are known for delivering high-quality work at competitive prices, which makes them really attractive to both domestic and international clients. And the growth potential here is huge.
How huge are we talking?
The Indian VFX market is projected to reach something like INR 3.08 trillion by 2026.
That's a lot of zeros.
Yeah.
So Identical Brains is riding a pretty massive wave here. But let's get down to brass tacks. How do they actually make money? What's their business model like?
So their core revenue comes from providing a range of VFX services. This includes things like rotoscoping, compositing, CGI, motion graphics, you name it. They've got it covered. They get these projects through direct contracts with producers and also through subcontracting arrangements with other VFX companies.
Subcontracting? You mean they're working with other studios?
Exactly. And it's actually a pretty significant part of their business. In
Yeah.
recent times, subcontracting accounted for about 43.90% of their projects.
So they're not just competing, they're collaborating.
Mm.
That's
Yeah.
interesting. Before we get too deep into their financials, I'm curious about something. We talked about their technical skills and their security credentials, but what about their artistic side? What kind of creative reputation are they building?
They've won several awards for their creativity. Actually, 2 Filmfare OTT awards for their work on Scam 1992 and Rocket Boys. And these aren't just for technical skill, they recognize the artistic vision and impact of their VFX work.
So they're not just technical wizards, they're storytellers. And that has to be appealing to clients who want their projects to have that extra something special. Okay, let's talk money. What can you tell us about their financial performance?
Their financials look pretty good. They've had remarkable revenue growth going from 389.29 lakhs in fiscal 2022 to a whopping late 2008.8 lakhs in fiscal 2024.
That's a huge jump. They're not just growing, they're practically skyrocketing.
Yeah,
What's fueling this growth?
well, it's a combination of factors, but their efficient operation plays a big part. Their EBITDA margin, which basically tells us how much profit they make on each rupee of revenue, was a solid 37.92% in fiscal 2024.
So they're bringing in the money and keeping a good chunk of it. That's what investors love to see. Let's dig a little deeper into those financials. Can you break down their revenue sources a bit more?
Sure. As I mentioned before, they have two main avenues: direct contracts and subcontracting. Their direct contracts are especially valuable. They often involve these long-term agreements with studios and production houses.
So a steady stream of work.
Exactly. It provides a more predictable revenue stream and helps them build these strong relationships within the industry.
So they're not just chasing one-off projects. They're building a foundation for long-term growth.
Mm.
But you mentioned subcontracting makes up a big chunk of their revenue. What's the breakdown there?
Subcontracting is running at about 43.90% of their projects. It gives them flexibility, allowing them to bring in expertise from other studios when they need it.
So they're building a network of collaborators, kind of like a VFX dream team.
Mm.
But relying on subcontracting could also make them vulnerable, right? What if those other studios raise their prices or can't deliver on time?
That's a valid concern. Managing those subcontracting relationships is really important. They need to ensure quality control, timely delivery, and negotiate terms that protect their own margins.
It's a balancing act for sure. Let's shift gears for a bit and talk about their client base. Are they overly reliant on a few big clients, or are they more diversified?
That's a good question, and it's something potential investors will definitely be looking at. Their client list is diverse, but their top 10 clients generated a substantial portion of their revenue, 96.41% to be exact.
That's a big chunk coming from just a handful of clients.
Yeah.
What happens if one of them pulls out?
It's a risk. They address it in their draft red herring prospectus. It's definitely something on their radar.
So diversifying their client base is going to be important for long-term stability. Speaking of risk, let's talk about this IPO. What are they hoping to achieve by going public?
The main goal is to fund their growth. They're looking to renovate their existing studio in Ontario, set up a brand new studio in Lucknow, and expand their post-production services. They're even adding a DI facility and a sound studio.
Wait, a DI facility? What's
Right.
that?
It stands for Digital Intermediate. It's where the final color grading and image processing happens. You know, those finishing touches that give a film its visual style?
So they want to become a one-stop shop for filmmakers,
Aye.
handling everything from the raw VFX to the final color and sound. That's
Yeah.
ambitious.
It is. It could attract a wider range of clients, but it also requires significant investment and expertise.
And that's where the IPO comes in. They're basically inviting investors to join them on this journey. But speaking of investors, what can you tell us about the IPO itself? How much are they looking to raise?
The issue size isn't specified in the draft red herring prospectus, but we do know it's going to be a 100% book-built issue.
Book built. What does that mean for someone who doesn't live and breathe finance?
Basically, it means the price of the shares will be determined by investor demand during the IPO process. So the more investors are willing to pay, the higher the price goes.
Well, it's kind of like an auction for a piece of identical brains.
Sure.
But before we get too caught up in the IPO excitement, let's take a step back and consider the risks. Every investment has its ups and downs. What are some of the potential pitfalls investors should be aware of?
Well, one key risk is that revenue concentration we talked about. They're heavily reliant on a small number of clients. So if those relationships go south or those clients run into trouble, it could impact Identical Brain's bottom line.
So spreading the risk is key. What other challenges do they face?
So competition is fierce in this industry. They're up against established players, both here in India and globally. To stay ahead of the game, they need to innovate, attract top talent, and keep investing in new technologies.
It sounds like they're running a marathon where the finish line keeps moving. But they seem to have a plan to address these challenges. What are their plans for growth beyond the expansion we've already discussed?
Technology is a big focus. They're committed to investing in the latest software and hardware to keep up with the rapid pace of innovation in the VFX industry. Upgrading their rendering capabilities, motion capture systems, virtual production tools, all of that.
So they're building up their digital arsenal to stay competitive. But technology is just one piece of the puzzle. What about their human capital? The artists and technicians who bring the magic to life.
Absolutely. Talent is crucial. They're very aware of that. Their plans include attracting and retaining skilled professionals, offering competitive salaries, a positive work environment, opportunities for professional development. They've even got mentorship programs to help nurture talent and build a sense of community.
So they're investing in their people, not just machines. That's a smart move.
Mm.
But as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'm curious about one more thing. We've talked about the financial risks, the competition, the technology, but what about the human factor? What's the work culture like at Identical Brains? Is it a place where creativity thrives, or is it all business?
That's a great question. And it's one we'll dig into in the next part of our deep dive. We'll explore how they approach creativity, collaboration, and innovation within their team.
Sounds good. I'm looking forward to getting a peek behind the curtain and seeing what makes this company tick. So for now, we'll leave you with this. Identical Brains. Studios Limited is a company on the rise. They're poised to capitalize on the booming VFX industry. They've got a solid track record, a smart business model, and ambitious plans for the future. But like any investment, there are risks to consider. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll delve deeper into their creative culture, their growth strategy, and the potential pitfalls they'll need to navigate.
Welcome back to our deep dive on Identical Brains Studios Limited.
Yeah.
Before we jump into their work culture, I wanted to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about their subcontracting.
Oh yeah, their reliance on other VFX studios.
Right, and I just wanted to point out that while it does come with certain risks, it's also a very common practice in the VFX industry.
They're not necessarily a red flag, just something to keep an eye on.
Exactly. It's like any business partnership. You got to manage it carefully. But it can also be quite beneficial. It lets studios like Identical Brains scale their workforce up or down as needed depending on the projects they're tackling. And they can tap into specialized skills without having to build a huge in-house team.
So it's kind of like having a global network of VFX talent on call.
Oh, exactly.
Speaking of talent, let's talk about the people behind the pixels. What's the vibe like at Identical Brains? Are they fostering a creative environment where their employees can really thrive?
Well, from everything I've gathered, they seem to be very focused on creating a positive and collaborative work environment. And that's crucial in this industry.
Why is that?
VFX is high pressure, you've got tight deadlines, the work can be very demanding, it's easy to burn out.
Yeah, burnout is a real problem in creative fields. So it's good to hear they're taking steps to prevent that. But what does a positive work environment actually mean? What are they doing to support their employees?
Well, they offer competitive salaries and benefits, of course, but it goes beyond that. They emphasize open communication, they provide opportunities for professional development, and they encourage a healthy work-life balance. They've even implemented mentorship programs to help nurture new talent and build a sense of community.
Sounds like they're trying to build a company culture that's more than just churning out VFX. They're actually invested in their employees' well-being and growth.
Exactly. And that kind of investment can pay off big time in terms of employee loyalty, creativity, and productivity.
It's like they're creating a talent pipeline, not just hiring for specific projects.
Yeah.
Okay, so they've got the people, the technology, the ambition, but even the best laid plans can go wrong. What are some of the other risks that could trip them up?
One that comes to mind is the inherent volatility of the entertainment industry.
What do you mean?
Their success is tied to the performance of films, TV shows, streaming content. If there's a downturn in the industry or if audience tastes change, it could definitely impact their bottom line.
That's true.
Yeah.
They're not immune to the whims of Hollywood or Bollywood. What about technological disruption? The VFX world is constantly evolving. What if a new technology comes along and makes their current setup obsolete?
That's a risk they have to constantly manage.
Yeah.
They need to be agile and adapt to new technologies as they emerge. Remember all those technology upgrades we talked about?
Yeah.
That's part of their strategy to stay ahead of the curve.
So they're playing a constant game of technological leapfrog.
Yeah.
Trying to stay one step ahead of the competition.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And another risk that people often overlook is talent drain. India has a booming tech sector, lots of competition for skilled professionals. Identical Brains needs to make sure they're offering competitive compensation and a work environment that people want to be a part of.
Otherwise, they risk losing their best people.
Right.
Okay, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Or maybe I should say the algorithm in the room. Artificial intelligence, AI, is transforming industries left and right. How is it going to impact the VFX world?
It's already having a huge impact. AI is being used to automate tasks, enhance image quality, even generate realistic characters and environments. But the real game changer is its potential to revolutionize the creative process itself.
Okay, I'm intrigued, but also a little scared. Are we talking about robots making movies and putting VFX artists out of work?
I don't think it's about replacing human creativity. I think it's about augmenting it. AI can handle the repetitive, time-consuming tasks, which frees up artists to focus on the conceptual and artistic aspects of VFX.
So it's like giving VFX artists a superpower.
Exactly. Imagine an AI tool that analyzes the script and suggests camera angles, or generates realistic crowd scenes with a click of a button. That's the kind of power we're talking about.
That's incredible. But it also raises some ethical questions, right?
Yeah.
If AI can create photorealistic images and videos, how do we even know what's real anymore?
It's a valid concern. As AI gets more sophisticated, we need to establish ethical guidelines and ensure transparency in how it's used. We can't ignore the potential for misuse, but we also have to embrace the creative possibilities.
It's a whole new era of storytelling where the lines between reality and fantasy are blurring.
Exactly. And it's an era that Identical Brains seems ready to embrace. They're investing in AI research and development, exploring ways to integrate AI tools into their workflow.
So they're not just riding the AI wave, they're trying to shape it.
Right.
That's pretty impressive. But let's bring it back to their IPO. How does AI factor into their plans for growth?
AI is a key part of their strategy. By leveraging AI tools, they can streamline their workflows, increase efficiency, and offer more innovative and cost-effective solutions to their clients.
So it's not just about making cool visual effects, it's about using technology to gain a competitive edge.
Right. And it's not just about the technology itself, it's about having people who know how to use it. Identical Brains is investing and training their team to become proficient in these AI tools so they can really harness the full potential of this technology.
It's like building an army of AI-powered VFX wizards.
Hmm.
Okay, but even with the best technology and the most talented team, they still face challenges, right?
Of course. One of the biggest challenges for any company operating in India is navigating the regulatory landscape. The government plays a big role in the media and entertainment industry, and there's always the potential for new regulations or policy changes that could impact their operations.
Right, we talked about the Film Censorship Board earlier. What other regulatory hurdles are there?
There are regulations related to intellectual property rights, data privacy, labor laws. It's a whole web of rules and regulations, and it's constantly evolving.
It's like playing a game where the rules can change at any moment.
That's a great analogy. But it's not just about compliance, it's also about advocacy.
Mm.
Identical Brains needs to be actively engaged with policymakers, advocating for policies that support the growth of the VFX industry in India.
So it's not just about creating awesome visual effects, it's also about playing the political game.
To some extent, yes. They need to understand the political landscape, build relationships, and make sure their voice is heard.
It's a lot to juggle. It sounds like they're up for the challenge, though. They've got the talent, the technology, the ambition, and a good grasp of the risks. What do you think is the one thing that could make or break their success?
I would say their ability to adapt. The VFX industry is constantly changing, and they need to evolve with it. They need to embrace new technologies, anticipate shifts in audience tastes, and navigate those ever-changing regulations.
It's like they're surfing on a wave of innovation, trying to stay balanced and avoid wiping out.
Exactly. Their agility and adaptability will be crucial to their long-term success.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive. We've talked about work culture, the challenges they face, the impact of AI, the importance of navigating the regulatory landscape. What's next?
In the final part of our deep dive, we'll take a closer look at Identical Brains' financial performance. We'll break down their key ratios, analyze their profitability, all that good stuff.
Sounds good. I'm ready to see how those numbers stack up and what they tell us about their future prospects. Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll dive into the financial side of this fascinating company. And we're back for the final part of our Identical Brains deep dive. We've talked about their creative side, their tech strategy, the challenges they face, but now it's time to crunch some numbers. Let's dive into those financials and see what they reveal.
This is where it gets real for investors. You want to see if the numbers back up the story. And luckily, Identical Brains' draft red herring prospectus gives us a pretty clear picture.
So what are we looking at? What numbers should we be paying attention to?
Profitability is key, and they've got a strong track record there. Their PAT margin, that's profit after tax, hit 26.62% in fiscal 2024.
Meaning for every 100 rupees they bring in, they're keeping about 26 as pure profit after expenses. Pretty impressive, right?
Definitely. It shows they're not just growing, they're doing it efficiently and managing costs effectively.
And how about their return on equity?
Yeah.
Another metric investors watch closely.
Yeah. Their ROE was a solid 50.14% in fiscal 2024. Basically means they're generating a healthy return for their shareholders, which is a good sign for attracting future investment.
So they're using their resources well and making money for the people who back them. But we also talked about their working capital needs. How's that situation looking?
Working capital is always a big factor in VFX. Projects can take a long time to complete, so they're often paying employees and contractors upfront while waiting months to get paid by the clients. But their debt-to-equity ratio is pretty low, which suggests they've been managing this well.
So they're not drowning in debt to keep things running. But as they grow, those working capital needs are going to increase. How are they planning to handle that?
That's a big reason they're going public. Part of the IPO proceeds will be used to fund those extra working capital needs as they take on larger and more complex projects.
So it's like fueling up for a growth spurt. Makes sense. But let's not forget about the risks we discussed. How do those factor into the financial equation?
Risk is always part of the game. We talked about their revenue concentration relying on a few big clients. That's something they'll need to address to create more stable and predictable income streams.
Diversifying the client base is key for the long haul.
Mm.
What about those external factors, though? Like a downturn in the entertainment industry or changes in regulations? How do those impact the financial outlook?
Those are harder to predict and quantify, but they're definitely things investors should keep in mind. Any slowdown in film and TV production could affect VFX studios like Identical Brains.
It's a reminder that no company operates in a vacuum. They're all part of a larger ecosystem.
Mm.
All right, as we wrap up this deep dive, what's your take on Identical Brains' overall financial picture?
Well, they've got a lot going for them: strong revenue growth, solid profitability, and a good track record of managing their finances. But they're not without challenges. Their future success will depend on managing those risks, diversifying their client base, and adapting to this ever-changing industry.
It's a balancing act, for sure, but they seem to have the skills and the awareness to make it work. So for anyone thinking about investing in their IPO, what's the bottom line?
Do your research, carefully review their financials, weigh the risks and opportunities, and make a decision that aligns with your own investment goals and risk tolerance.
Great advice. And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our Identical Brains deep dive. We've covered their business model, their creative culture, their technology, their financials, and the road ahead. It's been a fascinating journey. We hope you've learned something along the way.
And remember, investing in an IPO always comes with risks. So do your due diligence before making any decisions.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.